Hi, I'm Ash, and I believe we all have a story worth sharing. I believe in the power of our voices to change the landscape of the world. I believe in sharing my story to create connection to one another through shared experience. This is my story of becoming Ash Creator Being. I've always been a highly creative, project-oriented, language-loving, collaborative goofball artist. I grew up from the age of 5 actively pursuing theater, acting, singing, tap, jazz, ballet, hip-hop dancing, drawing, painting, classical and jazz piano, and creative writing. Yes, I tried sports, but I was abysmal at most, except baseball. But even then, I fractured my thumb playing, and that was it for me. At the age of 8, I told my dad that he didn't understand me because I was an artist. I also said I wanted my own life. Sorry, not sorry, Dad. I loved school, did well academically, had a wonderful relationship with my mother. Really, she's an angel. And a shitty relationship with my stepdad, who would verbally abuse me, then threaten me to not say anything to my mother. I was naturally an empathetic, easygoing, expressive, and wide-open kid. I was a fairly overweight kid. I loved eating, honestly, and I was definitely teased. I was also terrified of getting into any trouble or experiencing any sort of conflict with anyone. Hence, I had a covert streak of rebellion in me that would squirt out by sneaking away to do something only I wanted to do, like disappear to our neighbor's yard to eat off their raspberry bushes. But mostly, I was very satisfied with just my mom watching me dance my butt off in our basement. My life changed dramatically at age 12. I was on a school ski trip, took a tumble, then immediately had fierce sciatic nerve pain up and down my leg for months. Further testing showed I had a small, isolated cancerous tumor, Ewing's sarcoma, in my sacrum. The fall on the ski trip aggravated the area just enough to bring attention to it. My best friend Erica saw it all happen, and to this day she still talks about a very bright light surrounding the whole scene. It was a miracle. My puberty consisted of chemotherapy and pelvic radiation. I had world-class doctors, wonderful friends, and had a miraculous healing in my grandma's Catholic church where my sciatic nerve pain vanished after I felt a white, hot sensation fill my entire body. I honestly didn't even remember it, but I told my mom about it at the time, and she reminded me years later of my account. At my scans a month later, my tumor was completely gone, and my doctors were very surprised. My parents were scared out of their minds for years, and my stepdad still behaved like a self-centered jerk. But I had as much fun with cancer as I could have, and for 8th grade Halloween, my wonderful friends and I were the Addams Family, and I loved the curious looks from people being Uncle Fester. The 2 other families on our oncology floor we befriended during my treatment had kids that passed away. My mom went through intense survivor's guilt. I knew during my entire treatment I was going to be fine. I prayed on a St. Peregrine medal daily. It's the patron saint of cancer patients in the Catholic Church. But after treatment, I was left menopausal at 14 years old, and I felt incredible pressure on myself to live every day to the fullest. It's funny, even though I experienced prayer and spontaneous healing during my stint as a cancer patient, I really had very little conscious interest in God, and the idea of God's plan seemed like a joke to me. My parents didn't raise me with any belief system except to be kind and forever curious about life. I ended up being a Make-A-Wish kid, went to the 2002 Tony Awards, and sat right up to the stage to see Bernadette Peters and Gregory Hines host. I hobnobbed with Broadway and television talent, and after that, I was laser focused on getting there by my own talent one day. Post-cancer was all about doing everything in the face of fear. It was 5 more years until I'd be clinically considered in remission. And this meant for me more theater. Summers in New York City, Carnegie Mellon Pre-College, Northwestern Cherubs, and as much experience as I could get doing shows and trainings. Luckily, my family not only saw my talents, but believed in my drive. I had full support from my mom, dad, stepdad, and extended family. I loved the rest of my middle school and high school experiences and received awards for my character, writing, speech and debate, choir, and academics. Forget math and chemistry, though. I scraped by in those classes, but everything else I enjoyed. I had really incredible and talented friends, and I felt complete with my public education, and I could not wait to go to college. I got accepted to Point Park University for musical theater, and I really loved my time there. I found out I loved directing even more than acting and got to build both my acting and directing resumes. I founded with wonderful college friends ETP, the Experimental Theater Project, and enjoyed producing a live show on what I called Empowerformance, socio-cultural political gallery interactive theater. I studied abroad at Regent's College in London, had the time of my life exploring the UK, and studied art history, theater, and global politics while there. Fun fact, I slept through a whole day of my final exams because I was out every night exploring the city in my high-heeled boots, but my favorite professor took pity on me and I still got to take my finals. After graduating, I thought I wanted to go to American University for grad school in artistic directing. In the interview, I said, "Sorry, but I think this isn't what I want anymore." And in perfect timing, I got an agent from my LA showcase put on by PPU. I felt the urge, leaned in, and took the mystical plunge for Hollywood. Little did I know it was going to be a complete culture shock. So from 2009 to 2014, I knew really no one in LA. I had never done really any on-camera work. I hustled and gave myself 5 years to make it happen. My family continued to support me heavily, and I couldn't have made a real try of it had I not had their support in every way. I dove every part of myself into expanding my skills in marketing, branding, auditioning, creating my own content, building my resume, casting workshops, doing extra work, and agent workshops. I landed a great commercial agent, and within 3 years, I was booking indie films, regional and national commercials, getting auditions for network TV, and generally trying everything that scared or thrilled me. Being in a burlesque troupe, directing theater in Hollywood, a stand-up course performing at the Improv, higher-level improv classes at UCB, dancing with swing dance pros, doing the full Artist Way program with exceptionally talented friends, and cabaret. I was still never really confident in myself. However, I tried my best, but I beat myself up constantly and rarely felt like my full capabilities were showing up. From the age of 16, I saw an excerpt, Marianne Williamson's A Return to Love, and it said, "Our deepest fear is not that we are inadequate. Our deepest fear is that we are powerful beyond measure." I had a shockwave in my body, and I knew it was so true. But I thought to myself for over a decade, how in the hell do you change that for yourself? Amidst the joyful exploration in my craft, I experienced a very dark underbelly of Hollywood, a decade before Me Too, with a range of professional men and women. I was molested by one of my film directors, but couldn't speak up about it. I also was admittedly drinking the LA water of seeking out being seen everywhere I went. Honestly, it was all pretty damn toxic in retrospect. I experienced LA in all its glorified detail. The museums, the Magic Castle, the Playboy Mansion, clubs, beaches, movie lots, parties in the hills, Scientology events, couch surfing during my hard stretches, groceries at farmers markets with only my tip jar money, the hiking, the yoga classes, movie premieres, gang shootings, wine tasting at the vineyards, swinger couples trying to bed me, and strange meetings with the drug addicted and homeless. I had every odd job you can stereotype an actor with: barista, cater waiter, hostess, waitress, event coordinator, personal organizer. And organically, I began to develop my own holistic health journey. By the age of 22, I made the choice to go off my hormone replacement therapy. Went full-on plant-based, researched self-healing for the body, and did all kinds of detoxes ranging from Ayurveda to Chinese medicine to alkaline to modern cleanses, and my periods came back naturally within a year. But I still believed I wouldn't be able to have children. I became a guest health blogger and collaborator with wonderful people like Ayurvedic expert Lissa Coffey and Body Temple LA led by Ava Van Valen. I wrote my own plant-based cookbook, created a side business called Kitchen Coach LA to help people meal prep and cook plant-based at home, and then had a massive, totally unexpected spiritual awakening. A complete 180 that would shock pretty much everyone I knew. 2014 until the end of 2019. I went to a class at a home of a friend of my then boyfriend and met a teacher who changed my life. I experienced energy, connection to grace, and deep initiation into inner work. My mind was totally blown. I had massive physical experiencing for months and found very quickly I no longer wanted to act. I broke up with my live-in boyfriend, moved out of LA, and moved in with my teacher named John and his partner Elena in Ventura, California. He founded the small but hearty nonprofit Adventures in Consciousness and had a handful of students. I had a very powerful time with him. But there was cognitive dissonance as well with him as a teacher. Blurred boundaries, suffering as the spiritual path, destructive protectionism. I only left the house to get mail, groceries, and to teach or have teachings. I snuck around to take my dog for walks on the beach or to have an occasional lunch with a friend. I went through the phases of spirituality, the honeymoon, the tell everyone I know how great this is, a breakaway from most people in my life, a massive spiritual ego, then eventually greater spiritual discernment, learning we're not here to fix anyone, learning we're not here to tell people what to do, only share from our experience in hopes of guiding people back to themselves. Then the icing on the cake, an eventual, very painful breakaway from my teacher. Very few people could understand during these 5 years why I gave up my life. But what I was experiencing internally was so unbelievably powerful, I couldn't turn away. I felt relief, actually, from leaving my life in LA behind. I knew I had to be where I was to learn what I needed to learn. I was truly experiencing the greatest things I had ever experienced. It all surpassed my love of anything else I had ever done or known. During this wholly transformative and explorative time, I experienced the cosmic Google of world religions and what the major common denominators were. John had spent his life collecting over 10,000 original spiritual texts from all over the world and had read most and practiced most for over 30 years. I became a student, totally celibate, lived like a modern monk, and practiced hundreds of meditations, practices, and initiations into Hinduism, Christianity, Judaism, early Christianity, Buddhism, Sufism, Zoroastrianism, Egyptian mysticism, Greek mysticism, and the all-importance of the divine feminine, in addition to becoming familiarized with conscious evolution. I was diving deep into feeling feelings with the power of my attention. I became certified in incredible mechanical forms of self-healing like EFT and tapping, Sedona method, and much more. I got certifications in yoga and ministry counseling. During this time, I had the opportunity to teach cooking classes at a private school for gifted kids, then introduced them to the awareness training practices and self-help practices I was learning, and Healthy Minds, Healthy Bodies kids programs began. Over 8 years, I workshopped HMHB with gifted, Montessori, and public school, as well as nonprofits like the Boys and Girls Club and Big Brothers, Big Sisters. We had incredible success with kids, parents, counselors, and teachers, and slowly, I, the student, became the teacher, but still always the student. I felt HMHB was going to be my legacy, and I poured as much devotion into it, if not more, than what I had done to jumpstart my career in Hollywood. I learned my version of website building, graphic design from Elena, who was a pro, and began building up our programming in handouts, videos, and in person. I also took one-on-one clients of all ages in forms of meditation and working through trauma from a place of awareness and self-healing. It was so utterly rewarding. I made hardly any money during all this time. I decidedly chose spiritual poverty and had to later spend years working my way out of this mentality. I played incredibly small in every way, except in my arena of teaching, and for 2 summers I directed local children's theater. I took care of John, who had health issues, as an at-home nurse and caregiver funded by the state of California, which provided me a meager income. When I did leave to go out into the world, I experienced for days afterward a processing in my body. It was like I had a bad cold for days after every time I taught. It was a wild experience, but on a level of consciousness, I knew I had to keep going out and experiencing it. It was not uncommon for me during these years to spend 10 to 16 hours a day in personal practice and actively working on internal emotional healing, both guided and intuitive. When I wasn't focusing on my own practice, I cooked for the household, created HMHB content, called my friend Tracy, who was another student of John's, to get some perspective on my life, hung out with Elena and the 14 indoor-outdoor cats she cared for, and cleaned and organized because John had a palpable hoarding tendency. It was the pendulum swing in the far opposite direction as a young actress in LA. My societal recluse era shifted in 2019 when I met a man who is living in my mom's basement. No joke. An exchange student whom had become like chosen family to my mom and sister. His name was Eduardo, and even though he was 8 years younger and lived back in Ohio, I heard so clearly with a downpour of divine love in my body, "You've learned truth, now he's going to teach you how to love." Eduardo and I met at a conference and had the most magical 4 days together, wherein we both felt we could marry one another. I could feel Eduardo at all times after that meeting in my body. We spoke every day. I left John's home in Ventura after deciding I needed to leave whether or not my relationship with Eduardo worked out. It was a massive leap of faith in myself at the time, and I never talked to John again. He believed I was making a huge mistake and was terribly disappointed, to say the least. Ed flew in, and we drove across country back to Ohio. We got married in my mom's backyard with only her and my dog Yeshi as witnesses, then later a courthouse marriage on a random Wednesday night. I moved back to Ohio, began to work in the local school system as a substitute teacher, then quickly began accepting opportunities for teaching HMHB in the schools and public library system. It was a hard transition for me integrating back into normal life, but I was grateful to be with Ed and in the safety net of being home. After deconstructing my time with John, I realized what a karmic experience it was. I felt extreme gratitude, and I learned definitively how to take the best and leave the rest. Ed and I were blissfully playful and enjoying each other when we weren't going through what I thought were early marriage issues, but in truth, there was much more happening. I was madly in love with him, wholly devoted, deeply understanding, had no boundaries, and self-sacrificed completely. Years later, he would tell me he married me because he thought I could save him. Oh, Lord. There was one isolated instance of physical abuse and a small pattern of verbal abuse, but I chalked it up to him starting a process of going through his massive childhood trauma and us working through these tough things intimately. I was used to sitting for hours a day doing internal work, so this really didn't faze me in the long-term benefit I thought it would provide. He was, however, convinced I was cheating on him frequently, which was disorienting and destructive. Professionally speaking, during this time, I was really enjoying now having nearly 350 students a week, ages 5 to 75, with my 6 different teaching gigs. I researched the composition of TED Talks and took a stab at creating my own TED Talk on the importance of wellness education in our society. 3 people showed up to my presentation after a ton of time and energy getting the word out. One of which was a lovely middle-aged mom and grad student named Anna, who was a huge supporter of mine at the time. And she just said, "Ash, I think this is so ahead of its time, but when people are ready to hear it, it's going to be so important." After my first 3 years back in Ohio, I completed my opus at the time. 3 digital year-long programs for tots, kids, and teens for HMHB, with as much research as I could find to support the practices I was offering. It was over 400 hours of educational video and workbook content I had created. Less than 20 people have actually seen it. I learned so much myself. The fundamental importance of simplicity and intentional language in education, especially with the intersection of spiritual or somatic experiencing with mental health. I began to learn about boundaries, reparenting, and deeper levels of trauma education. Then COVID. Everything stopped. I had no jobs. Then my other personal opus happened. I got pregnant while Ed was going through a massive depression. He had, ironically, moved out in a fit of self-assertion, but during our visits, we revisited our deep connection, and I got pregnant. But just 2 weeks before my scheduled C-section, after Ed and I had moved back in together and reconciled, I kicked him out because he was being unbelievably mean to me during my last trimester, and I couldn't understand why or allow it with a newborn. Then I got confirmation he was cheating on me. I spoke to the girl, Maggie, who was fully aware of his marriage and my pregnancy, and she said she was still going to pursue him. It was during this time I was introduced to the work of the revolutionary Phil Good, and the rainbow bridge of embodied sovereignty was brought into my life. It was a very dark yet joyful time when I had my beautiful miracle daughter, Ava. Let's just take a moment for the most spiritual initiation you could possibly have, which is becoming a mother and being in the midst of the most vulnerable position of a woman's life, which is early postpartum. But I found tremendous amounts of surrender in my desperate heartbreak and lostness, used every tool I knew to heal, had the support of my mother, who was also heartbroken, and was introduced to the revolutionary sacred sexuality work of Sophia Sundari. Mountains of pain were moved inside of me in a matter of months. I experienced a tremendous expansion of my intuition and total confirmation of New Earth and my soul mission. My mom could also start feeling this literally as a stream of energy in her kitchen. It was remarkable to not be alone in my experiencing anymore. I also heard clear as day the divine tell me, Ed is going to come back to you. You'll be happy and have a second child. I thought, God really was nuts. But then it happened 6 months later. I also intuitively knew I had to put HMHB on the shelf. I sobbed as I let all my work go, essentially packing up everything into filing cabinets, but was deeply comforted by the divine saying it was preparing me for something greater. In a full-blown experience of a miracle, Ed and I doubled down on healing as a couple. I held real boundaries and fully expressed myself for really the first time ever, and we had somewhat of a honeymoon phase. I got pregnant 6 months to the day postpartum. We bought a house we wanted to fix up, and our second miracle daughter, Ray, was born in 2022. During this time postpartum, I experienced escalated physical and emotional spousal abuse. Eduardo's family began verbally abusing me as well, especially his mother, in one of the worst experiences of my life. I told no one the full story, not even my mom, until months after the fact. Eduardo put on an incredible show, and it was Jekyll and Hyde, and little did I know he was questioning, dismissing, and bad-mouthing me to many other people. Ed was beautifully playful, charismatic, thoughtful, to anyone looking outside, and to me and our girls, until he wasn't. It was extreme cognitive dissonance. It was the most exhaustive experience of my life. I finally fully realized I had been in the midst of spiritual warfare for a long time, but was committed to seeing it through until I understood more and felt confident in a safe exit. In October of 2022, I heard clearly within myself on our last real family vacation, Ed will never be the man you need. This is the beginning of the end. I was a stay-at-home mom from day one as a committed choice, and during my time at home, I also was gifted the opportunity to be the education director for a wonderful online platform and group called Sacred Awakenings. It was lifeblood to me, and I had a community of people with open hearts and inner knowing in my hometown. I supported workshops, gave talks, and kept deeply developing my own sense of sovereignty, joy, and intuitive gifts. It was in October of 2022 that I began forming the platform of Creator Being. I had just completed a container with Sophia Sundari, and I felt a massive download of what I was here to do. It filled me with such love and such confidence. It filled me with the hope of connecting to people all over the world who had the same feeling as me. Creator Being was a phrase I had heard when Ava was a little baby from Phil Good, and my expression of this phrase was my anchor of sanity, of my true inner knowing, and the first step in the fullest expression of my soul mission. 2 months after I committed to this Creator Being mission, I learned my teacher, John, had died, and I had another massive confirmation in my inner knowing of what I needed to step into. Every day I had only 2 hours to myself when I brought my children to the YMCA daycare room. God bless the YMCA and JCC. Those 2 sacred hours I walked outside, made a video, posted, and exercised. I was very much in the trenches of caring for my girls on my own, the personal boredom and isolation that many mothers go through, the exhaustion of not having consecutive sleep for years, the exhaustion of my unstable marriage, but I showed up imperfectly to use my voice nearly every day. I also started my Substack and began writing again. Then I got our home studio in order, ordered a microphone, and created my first 4 Creator Being podcasts. In 2023, I began the process of divorcing Eduardo. I learned that he had been cheating on me the majority of our relationship, had all the markers of covert narcissism, particularly mind-blowing deep manipulation tactics that revealed themselves, and that he'd been using illicit drugs as well. He made brief sexual comments about our young girls, and that was really the final straw for me to get moving on safely separating. I got our home ready to sell with the help of my mom, sold our home, got divorce on the table, went through a personal legal initiation into divorce and immigration law, and moved my girls and I to live with my mom while continuing to co-parent with Eduardo, all within 4 months. My divorce finalized in February 2024, and this story is still playing out. Once life had somewhat settled for my girls and I upon arrival at my mom's home, I was gifted a wonderful opportunity out of the blue to become a guide on the Vivaya Live platform. I was recognized as a world-class healer and guide, and it was a significant moment for me. A major win after months of moving through so much painful efforting to make a new life for my girls and I, a life that felt authentic and free, my creator being life. In November 2023, I saw an Instagram ad for a trust quest I knew nothing about, but immediately knew I had to go do. Within 36 hours, I was accepted and booked a flight to Bali for 14 days with the group Humans I Trust for deep self-nourishment, meeting soul family, and doing deep dive workshopping to aid in massive up-leveling in every aspect of life. I had a beautifully shocking experience in Bali, and with the soul family I came to cherish. Our spirits were free, and it was the most real community with utter strangers I'd ever experienced. It was the best investment I had made in myself in years. I returned with renewed affirmation of what I was here to do. I came home, and within a month, completed my first season of the Creator Being podcast, started Spirit Actually podcast, took some fun new photos, updated my website, and crafted my completely original masterclass offerings. As I step into this next phase of life, I know that I am meant to share my experience of trust falling with myself and the loving universe. I know my experience is enough. My life has indeed been a string of miracles. I have gone to tremendous edges in a conscious, detailed surrender of my life. I really don't question the capacity for greatness I have, and that we all have. The greatness I speak of is the capacity for the pursuit of expansion, healing, love, authenticity, and higher truth for ourselves and all humanity. I'm a humanist storyteller. I have developed myself and been uniquely molded in my life as a creator, healer, lover, leader. I offer everything for the highest good of all, and I am deeply grateful to have you here as we walk each other home into remembering our greatest abilities as creator beings, to trust our own uniqueness and to trust the loving universe to hold us on that journey to experience the greatness of that trust. I love you. Love, Ash.